Today, we're diving into a really big question, a tension at the heart of modern Christianity. How can one of the most popular messages in the world, one that's drawing in millions, also be seen as a huge roadblock to the faith's most fundamental mission? Let's get into it.
Everything really starts with this one number, 2 billion. That's how many people around the globe are considered unreached by the Christian gospel. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's about a quarter of every single person on the planet.
So you have to ask, right? After 2,000 years of history, how is this massive task still so far from finished? And here's where it gets really interesting. The material we're looking at today suggests that one of the fastest growing versions of Christianity might actually be part of the problem.
Okay, so to really understand this clash, we've got to go back to the very beginning, back to the mission itself. You might have heard it called the Great Commission. The source we're pulling from calls it, very pointedly, the unfinished task. And this is it. This is the command from Jesus that sets the whole thing in motion. And notice, it's not a suggestion or a nice idea. It's framed as the central, driving purpose of the whole movement. Go and make disciples of all nations. So, who exactly are these unreached people? Well, there's a specific term for them: frontier people groups, or FPGs. Now, we're not just talking about countries where Christians are in the minority. We're talking about entire communities where the number of Christians is less than 1 in 1,000. Places where there's no local church to even spread the message. You have to start from scratch.
All right, so you've got this difficult, costly mission on one hand. But on the other hand, a very, very different kind of message has exploded in popularity around the world. It's sometimes called a gospel of gain. Let's break down what that really means. So the prosperity gospel, at its core, is a message that centers on the individual. The main focus kind of shifts to you, your personal success, your financial well-being, your health and comfort. And all of these things are seen as the primary evidence that God is on your side.
And this right here is where things get complicated, because these two messages don't just exist side by side. The argument is that they are in a fundamental conflict with each other, pulling in opposite directions when it comes to that original mission. You can really boil the whole conflict down to the central question each one asks. The prosperity gospel is fundamentally inward-looking. It asks, how can God bless me? But the Great Commission is completely outward-looking. It asks, how can God be made known to them? You see the difference? One is about getting, and the other is about going.
And this really clashes with what Jesus himself said. The call to follow him wasn't about personal fulfillment or getting more stuff. It was a call to self-denial. I mean, take up his cross. A cross is an instrument of suffering and sacrifice. It's the exact opposite of personal comfort.
And that brings us to maybe the biggest disagreement of all. What do you do with suffering? In the prosperity framework, suffering is a red flag. It's a sign that something is wrong. Your faith is weak, or you're not doing something right. But in the Great Commission, suffering isn't just a possibility on the journey. It's often seen as an expected, even necessary part of being obedient.
I mean, just look at the Apostle Paul. He's considered the model for what a missionary should be, but his resume looks nothing like our modern definition of success. It is a laundry list of brutal, life-threatening hardships. The argument here is that a gospel that doesn't have a good answer for this kind of suffering simply can't fuel someone to go to the hard places.
So it makes you wonder, what kind of followers do these two messages produce in the long run? The contrast is pretty stark. One message tends to create consumers of blessing, people who are primarily interested in what they can get from God. The other message aims to create ambassadors of Christ, people who represent him no matter what it costs them personally. And that means they measure success in totally different ways. For one, the goal is visible growth, more people, more money, more influence, and it's all validated by what you can see right here and now. For the other, the primary goal is simply faithfulness and obedience. The validation isn't earthly results, it's an eternal reward. The timeframes are just completely different. You see this again with Paul's ambition. His goal wasn't to build a bigger ministry where Christianity was already popular. His driving ambition was to go to the hardest places, to the frontiers, to the people who had never even heard the name of Christ before.
And this leads to a huge practical problem. The vast majority of those unreached people live in places that are poor, remote, or politically unstable. Yet the prosperity message, which is all about tangible blessing, naturally does better in big urban centers where there are more resources and receptive audiences. It creates this massive mismatch between where the need is greatest and where the effort is going.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, it seems we're left with a choice. A choice about which of these messages is actually equipped to finish the job. And here's the core argument, laid out as clearly as possible. A message of prosperity might be incredibly good at filling auditoriums in places where the church is already established, but it just doesn't have the theological horsepower or the motivation to send people into the hardest, most spiritually dark corners of the world.
So, what's the alternative? The call is for a return to what's described as a cross-centered gospel. It's built on these 4 pillars. The focus should be on the cross, not on personal comfort, on simple obedience, not on looking for the best opportunity for yourself, on sacrifice, not self-promotion, and on an eternal perspective, not a sense of earthly entitlement.
Which leaves us with this final question to think about. If the goal is truly to reach those 2 billion people in those frontier people groups, what kind of gospel has the resilience, the power, and the motivation to actually get it done? It's a challenge to really examine the message we believe in and the mission we've been given.